Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. My name is Pooja, founder of Boundless Awareness. And with me today is a friend of mine, Meenadchi. I can't even remember how we met, but I am so happy we met. Meenadchi has her own website, Meenadchi.com, has a book called Decolonizing Nonviolent Communication, and is an author, a speaker, a holistic facilitator, and so much more. I'm so happy to have you here. Meenadchi, I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, thanks. It's good to be here. Meenadchi, she, her pronouns. More and more these days, I'm really identifying as a healing practitioner, leaning into my woo. A lot of what I do organizationally is doing healthy communication workshops. And then I also do ancestral healing work, specifically family constellation therapy is the modality that I use. But really, it's about listening to the body and then saying the thing that we want to say in the way we want to say it to build the relationship that we want to have, to build the relationships that we want to bring us forward is the essence of my work.
If there's people listening who haven't heard of family constellation therapy, could you tell us about that?
Super. Family constellation therapy is a modality that clears intergenerational trauma from the nervous system. And for folks who are sort of newer to that concept, the geeky fact that I like to share is that all of us existed in our grandmother's bellies, right? So my amma was born in 1953. I think she must have been conceived in like February 1953, which means that around June of that time, her reproductive system would have come online, which meant that the eggs that were me and my siblings were formed in like June of 1953, which is to say that anything that my amama, my grandmother, was sort of navigating, those stress responses, the daily things or the big things, all of that information would have had a quality of impact on how my genes are being formed, which then shapes how I respond to things in my present life. So just like a very, very common thing that happens, I have a lot of clients who are doing ancestral healing work who are financially stable, who are financially fine, and yet they have so much anxiety around money, and it's usually related to something intergenerational. So that's an example of what that is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. How long are clients typically with you when they
Oh,
are going through
yeah.
this healing?
I usually do, it's usually about 8 sessions, and we kind of like spread it out over like 2 to 3 months. The work, depending on how you're coming into the work, can be incredibly fun, but it can also be a bit deep. I've had clients say to me
Of
things like
course.
that they're clearing stuff out like in one session that they haven't talked to their therapist about in a year. You know what I mean? And so I think the simplest parallel is sometimes it feels like a psychedelic journey because you are getting into the gunk and it can feel kind of sticky and wonky in that moment, but like 3 to 6 months later, it feels so much better because the shit is just gone.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's really great. Okay, so as a healing practitioner, how does equity come into why is that meaningful to you?
Because I think that we build better worlds when we're building them together. And it just so happens that all of us were built or born into a world that has these systems of inequity, these systems of injustice built into it, which then shapes the way we engage with relationships. It puts us in these kind of bubbles where we don't have access to building relationships with ease, cross-culturally, cross-racially, etc. And it changes what we have access to. I was raised, I'm Hindu, that's the household that I was raised in, and was raised with the belief that we are part of each other. We are viscerally, functionally, physically a part of each other.
Yeah.
But if we don't know that in our real life, then we're going to take actions that wind up putting each other at harm or wind up putting each other at risk. So the piece around like deconstructing what are my conceptions of the world, deconstructing what are the relationships that I was given at birth that I was born into, and then how do I actually relate with as many people as possible that are here to build a world that actually feels really healthy for us to be in.
Mm. Mm. When you think about equity and community, and the way that we're treating each other, in the ways we can improve that. Do you have advice that you give your clients or advice that you give people on how to understand the bias that we're holding on a
Yeah.
daily basis?
I have a really beautiful tool that is not my tool. It was given to me by Dr. Carrie Kingsley, who was one of my most amazing, lovely teachers and mentors when I was in grad school at USC. And so what you do is you take Harvard has like an implicit bias test. And so you
Right.
take that test and you have to, the key to doing this activity is you have to be viscerally, brutally honest. You can't try to be a good person, right? So you can take the implicit bias test, be really honest with your responses. And then at the end, it gives you kind of like a rundown of here's where your blank spots are, right? Here's where your biases are. And then what you do is you pick a particular kind of like identity or topic or people that you want to really like understand and learn more about. And then every day spend like 2 to 5 minutes, like reading a lived experience from someone of that identity. And I always encourage my clients, like, there can be a tendency, I think, especially as you get higher in the professional level, to go super academic and to look for like the expert,
Yeah.
right? And like, don't do that. Get on TikTok, get on Reddit. Just listen to basic people talking about basic life experiences, right? Get the stories that you would otherwise never be able to hear. And then journal about what comes up for you. So for me, for example, I have been skinny my whole life. I have never been fat. I have never had to worry about going into a clothing store and not being able to find, you know what I mean? Like clothing that fits me or looks good on me. So that was the first thing that I started when I was unpacking my biases. Like, let me really think more about what is it like to move through the world in a body that is conventionally not accepted, in a body that is conventionally not celebrated. And if you do your bias diary well, there are two things that will happen. One, at some point, you will type out in your journal, I don't get why this is such a big deal. I don't know why they're making such a big fuss about it. I don't get why this is that important, right? You will say that if you're doing your bias diary honestly.
Hmm.
And that lets you look at your own shit. It just lets you really look at,
Yeah.
why is it I don't have this lived experience and yet I'm doubting this person telling me exactly that this is frustrating and hard for them? What is it in me that doesn't believe them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
What's missing?
what's missing? What me? And then you will keep doing your work. And the next thing or the thing eventually that will start to happen is you will start to say, how did I miss this? How did I not see this? You will walk into restaurants, into clothing stores, notice, like for me, it was like, I don't know, noticing things like accessibility options, climbing up and down stairs, and what is the entry into the bathroom like, right? For me, I don't have to think about those things, but when the door opens this way and that way, whatever, right?
Hmm.
You'll start seeing it on your own. And the beauty of that, because people, I think that when we come from, different marginalized identities, to some extent, there's like a willingness to educate people who want to learn, like people who really want to create change. You know what I mean? There's more openness to like being part of that education process. And so when you're not constantly looking to people of a marginalized identity to tell you what the right answer is, when you
Mm-hmm.
start being able to recognize it on your own, it's then easier to build those collaborative relationships. So it really feels like we're doing a thing together.
Yes. 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 You may not have that lived experience, but through thinking through it and really attaching your own um, everyday movements to understanding that, it becomes more and more innate, so that building community isn't some uncomfortable thing of like, oh, this is a different person who's I'm not normally. No, now it's like I don't have to ask any of those um, introductory biased questions where you have to educate me because I've already done the work
Yeah.
and I know a little bit more, so that building that bridge is smoother and
Yeah.
less performative.
Yeah.
Yeah, is more
Less
authentic, it sounds
painful.
like.
It's less painful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, less painful
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I love that. That is like, that's gold.
Cool.
That's gold.
Yeah. Dr. Kingsley for the win on that one. Mm-hmm.
So, on the flip side of that, because I think making this diary is um, a step into bravery and courage to go into an unknown space and to dive into the depths of your mind of what's unknown about it.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is fear.
Uh-huh.
So I want to, especially with a person who is so involved in decolonization, in teaching others nonviolent communication, in healing. I really want to ask you, in you know um, the painful world we're living and the current affairs that we're living through today, the genocides that feel so far, physically so far away and yet so close to us,
Yeah.
there is a deep fear of engaging, on standing up, speaking for what you know is right.
Mm.
There could be a fear of, who am I to say something,
Uh-huh.
or a fear of, how dare I go about my regular business when such atrocities are happening home and far away.
Yeah.
How do we even start thinking or talking about, or dipping our toe into this when we feel so much fear?
Yeah. My introduction to nonviolent communication happened to come, her name is Jayanti Siva. I call her Jayanti Akka, which means big sister. And I'm lucky because we're both Sri Lankan Tamil, right? So I immediately had sort of like a culturally responsive lens to how to engage these tools. And one of the quotes that Jayanti Akka gave me, I think she was using it in her work at the time, is from Howard Thurman, which is, don't ask what the world needs, but ask what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I think that the essence of that is really what has stayed with me. And it's also what I describe as decolonizing nonviolent communication, that it's not about being nice. It's not even necessarily about connecting with the other person, but it's about bringing your authenticity into the space. It's about bringing your like life force energy. What is it that you really want to say? How do you really want to say it? You know what I mean? And I think that I've seen lots of different things on the spectrum of how we are supposed to show up to atrocity. Um, and I think number one, it's the question of like, what do you really want to say? What feels true to you in this moment that wants to come out of your body? I think in terms of the fear component, there are real things that people are navigating in the context of like, will I lose a job? You know what I mean? If I say this thing, I'm never gonna say like speak up in such a way that actually like endangers you. But also think about what feels scarier. Does it feel scarier to say or do nothing? Does it feel scarier to show up as your authentic self? And if it feels scarier to show up as your authentic self, maybe lean into that. Maybe lean into that, because ultimately, like, quality of life is going to be stronger and better when we show up as ourselves. And I also don't think we do that alone. Like, you and I having this conversation is part of that, right? Like, we're here attempting to model a version of authenticity and like sort of fearless speaking, but we've also been in practice with each other. Like, you and I have been in relationship and conversation for
Yeah.
months at this point. So it's that resonance of like, find your people, don't try and go it alone, but like find your people and then say the thing that you want to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the more we're exposed to it, the more we're exposed to people speaking what they authentically believe, but also speaking calmly and clearly with the conviction, the more we're exposed to that, the more it normalizes for us. And the more, I feel, the more courage comes out of us. Like you were saying, gain exposure to the people who you think you have like least in common with, or that you have biases on. And the more that exposure, I think, really normalizes, like, oh, I can speak. I also believe that. I also can speak clearly and plainly. When it comes to genocide, when it comes to this administration, when it comes to Palestine, we know what we believe, and we can say it. No amount of book, 100 years of war on Palestine. That is an amazing book, but it's not gonna, if it's if it's not seeped into you, and if you're not exposed, then it's not going to be your words,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be from your spirit, and then it's going to feel hard and forced and
Yeah.
not right.
Can I share two things on this?
Yeah.
One is like trust time. There can be a sense of urgency to like speak in a particular way, but kind of like what you were saying, if you don't really know what you're speaking on, and even if there's pressure to speak on something, right? If you don't really know what you're speaking on, it's okay to stay silent. It doesn't mean you do nothing, right? It means you like go educate, you listen, you learn, but like not all activism, not all action needs to be visible in such a particular way, right? We've got different roles and different ways of doing the things. Which then leads into Deepa Iyer's work and like her beautiful, beautiful social change ecosystem, which is we all have different roles. And sometimes, you know, there was a time in my life when I was very much on the front lines. And I think that was true for you also. Like there was a time in my life where I was like getting the middle of the night phone calls, where I was like responding to things, where I was showing up at the hospital or the police station or whatever, what was like needed for the survivor at that time, right?
Yeah.
Very much frontline work. And I'm not doing that work these days. I'm doing a
Yeah.
different kind of work. So your role can also change and you still get to be part of the ecosystem of change.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just show this book for since we mentioned it, um, and it's been so pivotal for both of us. Deepa Iyer's book. Also, people should get this.
Mm-hmm.
Very great workbook. Speaking of workbooks, I just want to talk about yours.
Yeah.
Decolonizing nonviolent communication. I'm going to put the link up here. You can go here. It'll also be in our comments below, so you can find it there. It's in the third edition now. So, can you tell us about this workbook and why you wrote it, what people get from it, all the things?
Yeah, it was an accident. Like I like had done my first decolonizing nonviolent communication workshop in Los Angeles. I had gone to Sri Lanka to attend to some stuff. And then the program director, so it's published by the Feminist Center for Creative Work in Los Angeles. The program director reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to write a book?" And I was like, "Okay." And then over the next 2 weeks, I put some stuff on a Google Doc and I sent it back to her. She gave me some notes. We passed it over to the editor. The editor did some things, right? So this beautiful color, the way the tag, all of that stuff. And it just happened. And it just happened. And it has since kind of taken on this life of its own. And the kind of like pretty consistent feedback that I get is that it's very accessible. It's very simple. It's very tool oriented. Like, let's do a thing to practice listening to the body or like reshaping our communication. And specifically, that this book, because conventional nonviolent communication doesn't include a lens on power and privilege, and conventional nonviolent communication has a very, very, very structured way that you're supposed to connect, that you're supposed to deliver empathy. And my style is it's retain your flavor, like figure it out, like retain your authenticity, retain your dignity, and let's be effective and efficient in
Yeah.
the communication we want to have. So how do we blend this magic together to do a good thing? And so that's kind of where the book came from and what people share that they love about it. And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, and it is accessible and affordable. So, get your copy at the link below. We'll also put it in the comments, so you can find it there. I love that. You know, another. um, well, I want to get to two different things. So,
Okay.
where do I start? um, okay, we're laughing a lot here. You were talking about really heavy things, really important things of just like your workbook, Decolonizing Nonviolent Communication, about our roles that we play in our activism. that we don't need to be, at the front of the revolution if we don't feel like that's where our place is, to act authentically, but to have our spot there.
Yeah.
And in all of this, we're laughing, we're smiling. So help me understand, how is that possible that we're holding laughter and grief at the same time?
Ooh, I don't think that grief and laughter are just like grief and joy. They're all part of the same, fabric. Like we are allowed to hold lots of different emotions. I'm going to do my favorite party trick. So I'm going to have you do it with me. If anybody's watching, I'm going to have you do it with me. I'm going to have you put one hand up here and then one finger up with your other hand. And then imagine that this hand is like a newborn baby hand. And then this finger is a grown-up adult finger. If you put a grown-up adult finger inside of a newborn baby palm, what will you already got it. You already, right.
Yeah.
Because human beings are wired to belong together. It is functionally how we survive, right? Giraffes are born and are already walking. Kids can't walk until they're like 5, like really, 5 years of not knowing how to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
At this point in time, a mosquito could come in and kill me. Our skin is not that thick. We're not very immune to the world around us. The way we survive is through belonging, which is why when it comes to navigating conflict, and I'm going different places. So belonging, play is something that we only truly do when we're in a space of belonging. We really only get goofy with each other. We really only get creative with each other when we feel like we belong. And so if we know that belonging is where we find safety, conflict will immediately activate trauma responses in our bodies, right? Survival mechanisms, because when we are in conflict, it's like we don't belong. And so then we get all this kind of way with each other, right?
Yes.
If one party has capacity to bring in a little bit of play, a little bit of goofiness, a little bit of a reminder to both nervous systems, hey, I'm still with you. I'm pissed at you, but you still belong to me and I still belong to you. It brings everything down and we can re-engage with that frontal cortex like stuff. We can re-engage with the parts of our brain that know how to express compassion, that know how to be in collaboration, that know how to find each other. I think his name is Daryl Davis. This form of activism is not for everybody. And I hope I've got his name correctly. Do you know who I'm talking about, Daryl Davis?
No.
He's a musician on the East Coast. He single-handedly brought 200 people, I think it's probably over 200 people, out of the KKK by becoming friends with them. He just showed up, he just met them and then showed up in ways that were utterly disarming, that like were genuinely of service. I remember reading one story, like somebody needed a ride to the hospital or something like that. You know what I mean? So he gave it to them. Again, this quality of activism comes back to that social change ecosystem. It's not for all of us to do, but he's incredibly skilled at helping people who like viscerally wish acts of violence upon him to just be like, yo, like we're in this together. And through that work, he has brought people out of clan. That's amazing to me. That is a stellar skill.
Yeah, that belonging, that's with friends, with partners, with family. Yeah, you remember each other's humanity, and it really diffuses the conflict.
Yeah.
Something that's kind of related to all of this is you have a TEDx talk, which is wonderful. We're also going to link to that in the comments after today. But it's beautiful. It's on a topic that every one of us has gone through, and most of us can't make sense of. Can you just for those who haven't seen it, can you just talk to us about it, and also like your motivation for discussing that topic, which is so common but so underspoken?
Yeah. So my TEDx, when I was invited into the TEDx, everybody was like, oh my gosh, what are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about decolonizing nonviolent communication, yada, yada? And I was like, no, I'm going to talk about how my best friend broke up with me and how it broke my heart. It just broke my heart. Because coming from a culture where friends are family, that was not at all something that I ever expected happening in our lifetime. Her birthday is tomorrow. And I know that she has a lot of good things lined up for this year. We're not in contact anymore, right? And in the process of sort of just like making meaning, making peace with that, I also found a lot of tools that are like relevant for liberation, right? Tools like sometimes you just got to trust the process. Sometimes we don't know the reason or why things are happening, but you just have to trust the process, or you got to trust that things are going to be different than what you imagined. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to pause there and check in with you if I'm kind of answering the question or where you want me to go from here.
Yeah, I think sitting with the unknown,
Yeah,
when we have a friendship breakup or, that hurts so deeply, sitting with the unknown it can feel impossible. It is impossible.
yeah,
I mean, it's so deeply uncomfortable and we're always searching for the reason why.
yeah,
And so often, I mean, it's so common that nobody gets those answers.
yeah.
Um, what, how do we sit with that?
Ooh, I will tell you some things that helped me. So for me, this friendship breakup happened in 2019. I don't know what year it is. I think 2023, 23 is when I did my TED Talk. And then the year after that, I taught a class on healing after friend breakups. And I did a survey the summer before the class, and I had 98 people respond. And I will tell you, Pooja, friend breakups are like money, are like, I don't know what else, you know what I mean? But like all the things that we don't talk about, but everybody's dealing with them. Everybody has a story, everybody has an anxiety.
Yeah.
And when we just start talking about it, right? So for me, for example, I had done a lot of healing before I taught the class, but then getting those 98 responses and reading through people's stories was incredibly healing for me, because I was like, I'm really not alone. You know what I
It only took 98 people to.
mean? Yes.
Right. We're all like that, though. Yeah.
And it was so beautiful when I taught the class. I think that was also a very common theme, like people feeling not alone. And by the time we got to the end of the class, one of the participants asked the group, like, are you going to reach out to your former friend? You know what I mean? And unanimously, everybody in the group said, no, I'm not going to. But there wasn't a charge around it. There wasn't like it was just like that ended. That's over. That's where it is supposed to be. It still feels sad. I miss them. I love them. But that's where it gets to rest. So the answer is like tried and true community. Talk to your people. Like, remember that we're not alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating. That's such a destabilizing, I mean, it seems very obvious, but such a destabilizing event can happen to so many people. And yet all of us feel alone in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, to some extent has to do a little bit with the culture, that a lot of us are sort of raised in, for better or worse. It's kind of like, right, like disenfranchised grief, like kind of like pregnancy loss or like pet loss, right? There's things that grief is allowed to get put onto, but we're not taught how to grieve a friendship loss. We're not taught even very much how to celebrate friendships to begin with. Yeah.
I want to end in our last few minutes talking about all the things that you offer, how people can get to know you, can get access to you, and all your cornucopia of techniques and benefits that people like. I mean, just being in your presence, and for all of you, Meenadchi and I, we meet at least once a month, and we have a group that
That Pooja runs, that Pooja steers. Yeah.
and so I benefit all the time. So I want other people to benefit from just being with you. So how can they reach you? Tell us.
Thank you. So organizationally, I love doing communication workshops, helping people get into their bodies, listen, say the thing you want to say, get better at giving and receiving feedback, all of that stuff, right? So organizationally, communication and wellness stuff. And then for my lovely kind of like human beings on the side who are on some type of like healing and growth journey, I always do like a class every quarter. So right now I'm teaching my healing money trauma program to like shift that gunk. You can always work with me one-to-one to do that kind of ancestral healing work or join a practice group. You'll find all the information on my website. It's all very straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's really straightforward. It's your website.
It's
Can you
really,
imagine?
yeah.
Meenadchi.com. It's not that hard.
No, it's
With Meenadchi on Instagram, and send her a DM on LinkedIn at
yeah,
Meenadchi on LinkedIn. It's like super
yeah,
straightforward.
yeah.
Oh, I love having you.
Thank you.
I feel you know, every time we meet, I come in at whatever level, but I always leave much lighter. You have a real gift. Yeah.
Thanks.
We also would love to have your feedback, audience members. So if you go to talk.ac/Pooja Kotari and enter the code LinkedIn Lives, just let us know how you feel about today's topic. And definitely go to Meenadchi.com and get in touch. Get what you need. She's there for you.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you. And all of you, until next time, we'll see you in 2 weeks.